In the year 1843, on a quiet plantation deep in the American South, there stood a large wooden house that everyone avoided after sunset. The house looked ordinary from the outside. Tall windows, a wide porch, white wooden pillars standing proudly in front of the entrance. But there was one part of the house that few people ever spoke about, the attic. Workers whispered that sometimes, late at night, strange sounds could be heard coming from above the ceiling. Soft footsteps, a faint scratching, occasionally, something that sounded like crying. But whenever someone mentioned it, the plantation owner would quickly silence the conversation. No one goes up there, he would say. No one asks questions. And for years, the attic door remained locked, until the night someone finally opened it, and discovered that the plantation had been hiding a secret for more than a decade. A secret that had been living just above their heads the entire time. This is the forgotten story of the girl hidden in the plantation attic. The plantation house. In the early 1800s, plantations stretched across large parts of the American South. These estates were often built around a large central house where the plantation owner and their family lived. Fields of cotton or tobacco surrounded the property. Workers labored from sunrise to sunset, and strict rules governed nearly every aspect of life on the plantation. The plantation where this story took place was known as Willow Creek Plantation. It stood several miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by dense woods and wide cotton fields. The main house was the largest building on the property, 3 floors tall, painted white, with long wooden staircases leading to the upper rooms. But above the 3rd floor was a small, forgotten space, the attic. Unlike the rest of the house, the attic had no decorations, no carpets, no furniture, just wooden beams, dust, and darkness. Most plantation houses used their attics for storage. Old trunks, broken furniture, boxes filled with forgotten belongings. But at Willow Creek Plantation, the attic served a very different purpose. The owner of Willow Creek. The plantation was owned by a man named Thomas Whitaker. Whitaker had inherited the property from his father and had spent many years expanding its fields and increasing its production. To the outside world, Whitaker appeared to be a respectable man. He attended church regularly. He hosted gatherings for neighboring plantation owners, and he maintained strict control over everything that happened on his land. But the people who lived and worked at Willow Creek knew something different. Whitaker was a deeply secretive man. He did not like visitors wandering through the house. He rarely allowed workers inside unless absolutely necessary, and there was one staircase he kept locked at all times. The staircase leading to the attic. The servants who noticed inside the plantation house worked several servants responsible for cooking, cleaning, and maintaining the property. One of them was a woman named Eliza. Eliza had worked in the Whitaker household for many years. She cleaned the upper floors of the house and was responsible for maintaining the bedrooms and hallways. Because of her work, she often noticed things others missed. And over time, Eliza began to notice something strange. Food would occasionally disappear from the kitchen late at night. Not large amounts, just small portions. A piece of bread, a bowl of soup, sometimes fruit. At first, she assumed one of the other servants was taking extra food. But when she asked them, they all denied it. And none of them had any reason to lie. Food was already rationed carefully. Taking extra portions could lead to punishment. So the mystery continued. Who was taking the food? The sounds at night. Then one evening, Eliza heard something that made her uneasy. She had been cleaning the hallway outside the upper bedrooms when a faint sound reached her ears, a soft creaking noise. It seemed to be coming from above, from the ceiling. She paused and listened carefully. The sound came again. Footsteps, as if someone were walking slowly across wooden boards. But that was impossible. No one lived in the attic, and the staircase leading there remained locked. Eliza said nothing about it that night, but over the following weeks, she heard the sounds again. Always late in the evening, always above the ceiling, and always when the house had already gone quiet. A suspicion begins. Eventually, Eliza began to form a frightening possibility in her mind. Someone was in the attic, but how could that be? The door remained locked. The plantation owner kept the key with him. No servant was allowed near the staircase, yet the footsteps continued. And the missing food continued as well. Something was happening inside that house. Something hidden. Something no one was supposed to discover. The window. One afternoon, while cleaning the outside yard, Eliza noticed something she had never paid attention to before. High above the house, near the roof, was a small attic window. The window was narrow and covered in dust. Most people barely noticed it. But as Eliza looked up toward the roof, she saw a movement behind the glass. Just for a moment. A shadow. She froze. Her heart began to race. Because shadows don't appear in empty rooms. Someone was inside the attic, watching from the window. Fear and silence. Eliza told no one what she had seen. On plantations, asking too many questions could bring trouble, and the owner had made it very clear that the attic was off limits. But now she knew something others did not. Someone was living above the house, someone hidden, someone no one was meant to know about, and whatever secret the plantation owner was hiding. A careful investigation. Eliza decided she needed to know the truth, but she also understood the danger. The owner of Willow Creek Plantation, Thomas Whitaker, had always made one rule clear. No servant was ever allowed near the attic staircase. Breaking that rule could lead to severe punishment. So if she wanted answers, she would have to be careful. Very careful. Eliza began watching the movements of the household more closely. She paid attention to who entered the kitchen and when. She observed when Whitaker left the house, and slowly a pattern began to emerge. Every night, long after everyone else had gone to sleep, Whitaker would return to the kitchen alone. He would take a small tray of food, bread, sometimes meat, occasionally fruit. Then he would quietly walk upstairs, but instead of returning to his bedroom, he would stop at the locked staircase leading to the attic. The key one evening, Eliza hid in the hallway shadows and watched carefully. Whitaker reached into his coat pocket. He removed a small iron key. Then he unlocked the attic door. The hinges creaked softly as he pushed the door open. He disappeared inside for several minutes. When he finally came back down, the tray was empty, and the attic door was locked once again. Eliza felt a cold chill run through her body. Her suspicions were correct. Someone was living in the attic, and Whitaker himself was the one feeding them. The secret begins to spread. For several days, Eliza kept the discovery to herself. But secrets have a way of slipping out. Eventually, she shared what she had seen with another servant named Daniel. Daniel worked outside in the stables and had lived on the plantation most of his life. When Eliza told him about the attic, he stared at her in disbelief. "You sure about this?" he whispered. Eliza nodded. "I saw him unlock the door myself." Daniel shook his head slowly. "Then there's someone up there." They both looked toward the upper floors of the house. The attic window sat quietly beneath the roof. But now the house felt different. The secret had changed everything. The story of Whitaker's daughter a few days later, Daniel shared something he had heard years earlier. Before Eliza arrived at Willow Creek Plantation, Whitaker had once had a daughter. Her name was Clara Whitaker. Daniel remembered hearing the name spoken by older workers who had since been sold to other plantations. But according to the story, Clara had disappeared many years ago. No one ever saw her again. Whitaker had told neighbors that she had been sent away to live with relatives in another state. At the time, no one questioned the explanation. But now, and the story seemed far less convincing, Eliza felt a shiver move down her spine. "Daniel," she whispered, "what if she was never sent away?" Daniel looked toward the attic window. "You think she's still here?" The locked door. Over the following weeks, the servants quietly watched Whitaker's routine. Every night he carried food upstairs. Every night the attic door opened. And every night it locked again. But one evening, something unexpected happened. Whitaker left the plantation to travel into town. Storm clouds gathered across the sky as heavy rain began falling. Most of the household retreated indoors. But Eliza and Daniel knew this might be their only chance. Whitaker had taken the key with him. But old locks sometimes had weaknesses, and Daniel knew how to work with metal. After several tense minutes, the old iron lock finally gave way. The attic door slowly creaked open. Climbing the stairs. The staircase leading to the attic was narrow and dark. Dust covered the wooden steps. It looked as though no one had used the staircase for years, except, of course, Whitaker himself. Eliza held a small candle as they climbed upward. She simply stared at them with wide eyes. Daniel's voice trembled as he spoke. "You're Clara, aren't you?" The girl hesitated. Then she slowly nodded. 12 years. It didn't take long for them to realize the terrible truth. Clara Whitaker had not been sent away. She had been hidden in the attic. For 12 years, fed secretly by her own father, kept away from the world, locked above the house where no one would see her. The question was no longer whether someone lived in the attic. The question now was far more disturbing. Why would a father hide his own daughter for more than a decade? And what terrible secret was he trying to keep buried? Oh, the secret behind the locked door. The small attic was silent except for the sound of rain striking the roof above them. Eliza held the candle carefully, its weak flame flickering across the wooden beams. The girl standing before them looked fragile. She could not have been older than 20, but her eyes told a different story. They carried the tired, distant look of someone who had spent far too many years alone. Daniel spoke gently. "Clara, do you remember how long you've been up here?" The girl hesitated, then she nodded slowly. "Since I was 8. Eliza felt her stomach twist. 12 years. 12 long years hidden in a dark attic. Life in the attic. At first, Clara barely spoke. Her voice sounded rough, as though she was not used to using it often. But slowly, piece by piece, she began to explain what had happened. When she was a child, she had lived normally in the plantation house. She attended church with her father. She played outside in the yard. She had even taken lessons from a traveling tutor who sometimes visited the plantation. But everything changed after her mother died. Whitaker became distant, quiet, and deeply suspicious of the outside world. Clara remembered the day he brought her upstairs. He told her it would only be for a short time, just until things settled down, he had said. But the days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and eventually years passed. A prison above the house. Whitaker had locked the attic door and kept the key with him at all times. He visited Clara only at night, bringing food, sometimes books, occasionally clothing, But never explanations, never freedom. Clara was not allowed to leave. She was not allowed to speak to anyone. And the window remained her only connection to the outside world. She spent her days watching the fields through the dusty glass, listening to the distant sounds of work in the yard, watching seasons change from winter to spring and back again. But she never stepped outside. The rumors. As Clara continued speaking, Eliza and Daniel exchanged worried glances, because something about the story did not make sense. Why would Whitaker hide his own daughter for so many years? Finally, Daniel asked the question directly. Did he ever tell you why? Clara looked down at the floor. Her hands trembled slightly. He said people couldn't know about me. Eliza leaned closer. Why not? Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. Because of my mother. A dangerous secret. Clara explained that her mother had not been who everyone believed. Years before Clara was born, Whitaker had been involved in a scandal that could have destroyed his reputation. Clara's mother had not come from a wealthy plantation family. She had been the daughter of a woman who worked on another plantation nearby. When Whitaker married her, many of the neighboring plantation owners quietly disapproved. At first, Whitaker ignored the gossip. But after Clara was born, rumors began spreading across the county. Whispers about her mother's background. Questions about Clara's appearance. The rumors threatened Whitaker's standing among the powerful families in the region. And in a society built on strict social hierarchy, reputation meant everything. Whitaker became obsessed with protecting his name. So he made a terrible decision. The decision. After Clara's mother died from illness, Whitaker decided to hide the problem entirely. He told the outside world that his daughter had been sent away to live with distant relatives. But instead of sending her away, he locked her in the attic. As long as she remained hidden, no one could ask questions. No one could challenge the story. And Whitaker's reputation would remain intact. Clara became a secret. A living secret hidden above the plantation house. A sound from below. Suddenly Daniel raised his hand. Quiet, he whispered. Footsteps echoed faintly from the lower floors. The front door of the house had just opened. Whitaker had returned from town earlier than expected. Eliza's heart began pounding. If Whitaker discovered them here, the consequences would be severe. Blow out the candle, Daniel whispered. The attic plunged into darkness. Only faint moonlight slipped through the dusty window. They listened as Whitaker moved through the house below. His footsteps echoed across the hallway. Then they stopped. Right at the bottom of the attic staircase. The door opens. The old wooden steps creaked slowly. Whitaker was climbing toward them. The servants stood frozen in the darkness. Clara backed away toward the wall. Then the attic door swung open. Whitaker stepped inside, holding a lantern. The light illuminated the room. And the moment he saw Eliza and Daniel standing beside Clara, his face turned pale with fury. The confrontation. For several seconds, no one spoke. Whitaker's eyes moved slowly across the attic. You opened the door, he said quietly. His voice carried a cold edge that made Eliza shiver. Daniel stepped forward carefully. She's been here 12 years, he said. Whitaker's grip tightened around the lantern. That is none of your concern. Clara's voice suddenly broke the silence. Father. Whitaker turned toward her. For a moment his expression softened, but only for a moment. You were not supposed to see anyone, he said. I did this to protect you. Clara shook her head. You locked me away. Whitaker looked back at the servants. You will both leave this room immediately. But Daniel did not move. No, he said firmly. You can't keep her here anymore. The moment of truth. Whitaker's anger exploded. This plantation is mine, he shouted. "My house! My rules!" But something had changed. For the first time in 12 years, the secret was no longer contained. 3 people now knew the truth. And secrets rarely stay buried once they begin to surface. Whitaker realized it too. His carefully hidden world was beginning to collapse, and he would soon have to decide whether to protect his reputation or finally set his daughter free. When secrets begin to spread. For several long seconds after Daniel refused to move, the attic remained silent. Only the soft crackle of Whitaker's lantern and the steady sound of rain on the roof could be heard. Whitaker's face had grown pale with anger, but beneath the anger was something else. Fear. For 12 years he had controlled the secret. For 12 years no one had known Clara was hidden above the plantation house. Now 3 people stood in that attic. 3 people who could destroy everything he had tried to protect. His reputation, his authority, his place among the powerful plantation families in the county. Whitaker slowly lowered the lantern. "You don't understand," he said quietly. But Daniel did not back down. "Then explain it." "Clara speaks." For the first time since Whitaker entered the attic, Clara stepped forward. Her voice trembled slightly, but she forced herself to speak. "Father, please." Whitaker looked at her. "What?" For a brief moment, the hard expression on his face softened, but it quickly returned. "You don't know what people would do if they knew," he said. Clara shook her head. "I've been alone for 12 years. Her words filled the attic with a painful silence. 12 years of isolation. 12 years of watching life through a dusty window. 12 years of hearing voices below, but never being allowed to join them. Even Whitaker seemed unable to respond immediately. The fear of scandal. Finally, he spoke again. "You think this was easy for me?" Whitaker asked. His voice sounded tired now. "People in this county watch everything. They judge everything." He turned toward Daniel and Eliza. "You know what happens when a plantation owner loses respect?" Neither servant answered, because they both knew he was right. In that society, reputation meant power, and power meant survival. Whitaker had believed that hiding Clara was the only way to protect his standing, but the cost of that decision had been enormous, and now the truth was no longer safe. A dangerous choice. Whitaker walked slowly across the attic. He stopped near the small window where Clara had spent so many years looking out at the world. "You will not speak of this," he said firmly. His eyes moved from Eliza to Daniel. "This matter ends here." Daniel frowned. "You can't expect us to pretend nothing happened." Whitaker's voice hardened again. "You will do exactly as I say." But even as he spoke, it was clear the situation had already changed. Secrets rarely remain hidden once others learn them, and Willow Creek Plantation was filled with people who noticed everything. The first rumor. The next morning, life on the plantation continued as usual. Workers moved through the cotton fields. The kitchen servants prepared meals. Whitaker acted as though nothing had happened. But inside the house, tension hung heavily in the air. Eliza and Daniel avoided speaking about the attic in public. Yet something about their behavior had changed. They looked at the house differently. They looked at Whitaker differently, and the other workers began to notice. Whispers started quietly. "Something happened last night. I saw Daniel coming down the upstairs stairs. Why was Eliza cleaning the 3rd floor so early?" The rumors began as small questions. But questions have a way of multiplying. The watchful eyes. Several days passed, and Whitaker grew increasingly uneasy. He could sense the change in the air. Workers watched him more closely. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. Even the overseer, a man named Carter, seemed to suspect something unusual was happening. Whitaker began checking the attic door more often. He still carried food upstairs every night, but now he stayed longer, sometimes nearly an hour, and each time he returned, his expression looked more troubled. Clara's first request. One evening, after Whitaker brought her food, Clara finally spoke again. "Father, I want to go outside." Whitaker froze. "You know that's not possible." "I've spent half my life in this room," she said quietly. "I just want to see the fields." Whitaker looked toward the window. The same fields Clara had watched for 12 years stretched across the distance. But allowing her outside would risk everything. "If anyone saw you," he said, "they would start asking questions." Clara's voice trembled. "They already are." Whitaker said nothing, because deep down he knew she was right. A night of restlessness. That night Whitaker could not sleep. He walked the halls of the plantation house long after midnight. Every creaking floorboard made him uneasy. Every whisper outside his window sounded like a conversation about the attic. He had spent 12 years controlling the secret, but now it was slipping away. And once the secret reached the neighboring plantations, the consequences could be devastating. The moment everything changed. 2 days later, something happened that Whitaker had not expected. A traveling merchant arrived at Willow Creek Plantation. He had visited many plantations in the region over the years and knew most of the local families. While unloading supplies, the merchant looked up at the house. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Strange," he muttered. The overseer glanced at him. "What is?" The merchant pointed toward the roof. "That attic window." The overseer followed his gaze. "What about it?" The merchant shrugged. "Thought I saw someone standing there." The overseer laughed. "There's no one up there." But the merchant wasn't convinced. "I swear I saw movement." The secret reaches the outside. By evening, the merchant had already left Willow Creek Plantation. But he carried a story with him. A strange story about a shadow behind the attic window of Whitaker's house. And stories travel quickly in small communities, especially strange ones. Within a few days, neighboring plantations began hearing the rumor. Something unusual was happening at Willow Creek, something hidden inside the big house. And once the outside world started asking questions, Whitaker's carefully guarded secret would become impossible to protect. The day the attic door opened. By the end of the week, the rumors surrounding Willow Creek Plantation had grown louder. First they had been nothing more than whispers among workers and traveling merchants. But soon those whispers reached the neighboring plantations. Men who owned land nearby began asking questions. "Did you hear about Whitaker's house?" "They say someone lives in the attic." "Nonsense. Unless he's hiding something." In that part of the country, reputation meant everything. And once rumors began circulating among plantation owners, they rarely disappeared. The visitors. One afternoon, a carriage rolled slowly up the long dirt road leading to the Whitaker house. 2 men stepped out. Both were well-known plantation owners from nearby estates. They had come with a simple purpose: to find out whether the rumors were true. Whitaker greeted them on the front porch with a forced smile. "Gentlemen," he said calmly, "what brings you to Willow Creek today?" One of the men, Mr. Harlan, removed his hat. "We've heard some unusual stories, Thomas." Whitaker felt his chest tighten. "What sort of stories?" Harlan glanced toward the roof of the house. "Stories about someone living upstairs." Whitaker's expression hardened. "There is no one in my attic." But the second visitor spoke quietly. "Then you won't mind if we take a look." Pressure builds. For a moment, Whitaker said nothing. Refusing their request would only make him look suspicious, but allowing them inside would risk everything he had tried to hide for 12 years. "You're letting gossip get the better of you," Whitaker said firmly. Still, the two men remained standing on the porch. "We won't stay long," Harlan replied. Whitaker realized he had very little choice. If he refused them now, they would simply return with more men later, and the rumors would grow even worse. Finally, he stepped aside. "Very well." Inside the house, the men entered the plantation house and slowly walked through the hallway. Servants nearby pretended to continue their work, but their eyes followed the visitors. Carefully, the men moved toward the staircase leading to the upper floors. Whitaker walked ahead of them. His footsteps sounded unusually loud against the wooden stairs. When they reached the third-floor hallway, Harlan stopped and looked upward. The narrow staircase to the attic waited at the end of the corridor, and at the top of those steps, the locked door. The key Whitaker stood silently in front of the door. His hand slowly reached into his coat pocket. For 12 years he had carried the small iron key everywhere. It had protected the secret, protected his reputation, protected the lie he had built. But now the key felt heavier than ever before. "Thomas," Harlan said quietly, "open the door." Whitaker hesitated, then he inserted the key into the lock. The metal clicked, and the door slowly creaked open. Everyone knew where this was heading. The first step, outside the attic, was quiet. Sunlight from the small window fell across the dusty floor. Clara stood near the far wall, just as she had so many times before, but this time she was not alone. 3 strangers now stood in the doorway. For a moment, none of them spoke. The 2 visitors stared in disbelief. A young woman stood in the attic, thin, pale, but very real. Harlan turned slowly toward Whitaker. "My God, Thomas." Whitaker looked down at the floor. His voice was barely above a whisper. "She was never meant to be seen." The end of the secret. News spread across the plantation within minutes. Workers gathered quietly in the yard. They watched as Clara slowly descended the staircase. For the first time in 12 years, she stepped onto the main floor of the house. Her legs trembled slightly as she walked. Sunlight streamed through the open door. Clara paused near the entrance. She looked out at the fields, the same fields she had watched from the attic window for so many years. The wind moved gently through the cotton plants. Birds circled above the trees. For Clara, the world felt impossibly large. Whitaker's reputation collapses. The 2 visiting plantation owners wasted no time leaving. They had seen enough. And once they returned to their estates, the story traveled quickly across the county. Within days, everyone knew. Thomas Whitaker had hidden his own daughter in the attic for 12 years. What had once been a respected name among plantation owners now carried a shadow. People whispered about the story in towns and churches. Some believed Whitaker had acted out of desperation. Others believed it was cruelty, but no one could deny the truth anymore. The secret had been exposed. A new beginning. Clara remained on the plantation for several weeks after leaving the attic. The outside world felt strange and overwhelming. Simple things like walking through the yard or sitting beneath a tree felt unfamiliar. But slowly she began adjusting. Eliza helped her learn the routines of the house. Daniel often walked with her along the edge of the fields. For the first time in more than a decade, Clara could feel the sun on her face without looking through glass. But one thing had become clear. She could not stay at Willow Creek forever. The plantation carried too many painful memories, and the world beyond it was waiting. The girl who finally saw the world. For 12 years, Clara Whitaker had lived beneath the roof of the plantation house, hidden in darkness and silence. Now the attic door had opened, and the world she had watched only through a dusty window finally stretched before her. But freedom did not come all at once. After spending so many years alone, Clara found even the simplest moments overwhelming. The sound of voices, the open sky, the wind moving through the cotton fields. All of it felt strange and unfamiliar. Sometimes she would stand quietly on the porch, staring across the land as if trying to understand how the world had continued moving while her life remained frozen above the house. Eliza stayed close to her during those early days. She showed Clara how the kitchen worked, where the water well stood, and how the gardens behind the house were tended. Small things most people never thought about. But for Clara, each one was a new discovery. The changing reputation of Willow Creek. Meanwhile, the story of the attic spread across the entire county. At church gatherings, neighboring plantation owners whispered about Thomas Whitaker. Some spoke with disbelief, others with anger. How could a man hide his own daughter for 12 years? He must have lost his mind. Or perhaps he was simply afraid of losing his reputation. The truth was complicated. In a society where reputation controlled business, politics, and social standing, Whitaker had believed he was protecting himself. But his decision had created something far worse. Instead of preserving his reputation, the secret had destroyed it. Many of the neighboring landowners stopped visiting Willow Creek entirely. Invitations to gatherings disappeared. Whitaker found himself increasingly isolated. A conversation at dusk. One evening, Clara sat quietly beneath a large oak tree near the edge of the property. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the fields. Whitaker approached slowly. For several days he had avoided speaking with her, but now he stood a few feet away, unsure of what to say. Clara did not look at him. She continued watching the horizon, where the sky turned deep shades of orange and purple. "I never meant to hurt you," Whitaker said finally. Clara's voice remained calm. "But you did." The words hung in the air between them. Whitaker lowered his head. For years he had convinced himself that hiding Clara was necessary, that the outside world would reject her, that protecting his name meant protecting her future. But now those justifications sounded hollow. 12 years could never be returned. The decision to leave. As the weeks passed, Clara began to realize something important. Willow Creek Plantation could never truly feel like home again. Every room in the house reminded her of the years she had spent locked above it. The attic window still looked down from the roof, a silent reminder of everything she had missed. One morning she spoke with Eliza and Daniel. "I think I should leave," Clara said softly. Eliza looked surprised. "Where would you go?" Clara thought for a moment. "Somewhere new. Somewhere far from the attic, far from the secrets of Willow Creek." Daniel nodded slowly. Sometimes starting over is the only way forward. Whitaker's final choice. When Clara told her father about her decision, he did not try to stop her. He understood that she needed distance from the place where she had lost so many years. Instead, he arranged for a carriage to take her to a nearby town where distant relatives could help her begin a new life. On the morning she left, the plantation yard was quiet. Clara stood beside the carriage, looking one last time at the large white house. The attic window was still visible near the roof. For a moment, she imagined the girl she had once been standing there, watching the fields, waiting for a future she could not reach. Then she turned away. The carriage began moving down the long road leading away from Willow Creek. And for the first time in 12 years, Clara traveled beyond the boundaries of the plantation. The Empty Attic. After Clara left, the attic remained empty. Whitaker locked the door once again. But this time the reason was different. The room no longer protected a secret. Instead, it held memories he could not face. Years later, people in the area still spoke about Willow Creek Plantation. The story of the hidden girl became part of local legend. Some told it as a warning about pride. Others told it as a reminder of how fear can lead people to make terrible decisions. But for those who knew the truth, the attic represented something deeper. A lost childhood, a lost decade of freedom, and the quiet resilience of a girl who survived it. History is filled with stories of power, ambition, and control. But sometimes the most haunting stories are the quiet ones, the ones hidden behind closed doors, the ones that take years before the truth finally emerges. For 12 years, a girl lived above a house where life continued as if nothing was wrong. Meals were served. Guests were welcomed. The fields were worked. And yet, just above the ceiling, a secret waited in silence. The story of the girl in the attic reminds us of something important. Secrets built on fear rarely stay buried forever. Eventually, someone hears the footsteps. Someone notices the shadow in the window. And the door that was never meant to open finally does. This has been another story from Untold Reality Daily, where the forgotten truths of history are brought back into the light. Don't forget to subscribe to Untold Reality Daily for more untold stories. Thank you for watching.